we've only been sleeping 7, 8, 9 hours a night since the 1700s. Before that, we were all peasants working the land, and we used to have a siesta, and we used to wake up at about 3 o'clock in the morning for about an hour to do our prayers and do some mundane things, then go back to sleep for another couple of hours, and then wake up. So this whole sleep in one block is something that we've learnt and we've been taught as a baby to do.
Hi, Simon. Welcome to the show today. Let's start, like I often do, by getting a bit of context. What do I need to know about you?
Well, hello, and thank you for inviting me onto this. And I suppose I best explain. So currently what I do is that I'm a therapist, counsellor and coach. And my history was certainly not that. So I've been involved in the corporate world for more than 25 years. And that included becoming and building sales teams, going into operations. And the last 15 years of my career in corporate was HR and training. I was fortunate, and I class myself as being very fortunate, at taking redundancy some years ago. And then I had a strange and interesting conversation, very chance, with my GP. I was doing an annual checkup, and we got chatting about what I was going to be doing next. And he suggested, he's known me for many years, he suggested, why don't you be a counsellor? You'd be really good at it. You've got empathy, you're good with people, etc. So I went along and had some time to contemplate that, and also go into the in minutiae, because I do like to research, and find out all I could about therapy and counselling in the UK, etc., etc. And after a couple of months, I decided to embark on re-educating myself. So I became a mature student, and 4 years later, I've got a postgrad in psychotherapy. So I then opened up my practice. I practice in person to person in my hometown, which is in Loughton in Essex, which is at the end of the Central Line. And the rest of the time, I'd say 60% of my clients are online, like we are today.
Yeah. I mean, that is quite a journey. And, someone said, you'd be good at it. You've got some empathy and things like that. But you did have to relearn a lot. And during that process, and I've heard this before, did you then learn lots about yourself and your family and your friends, and you start to piece things together?
Yes, I mean, I didn't, because I was able to do this full time. I didn't just do the course, as it were. I went off down various rabbit holes during that, because I could, and learnt an awful lot about how the brain works and why humans are like we are, and what's stopping us in the 21st century being healthy and happy, and what we can do about it. What I liked about there's over 600 modalities in the UK. Okay, so why did I choose the one I did, which nobody's heard of, which is called HG, which stands for Human Givens? And it's because the gold standard in the UK, if you go to the NHS at the moment, is CBT. Most people have heard of it, and most people have maybe come across it, or a family member have.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't quite right as far as I was concerned, from a practical sense, in terms of being able to give the person that was getting the therapy practical and simple devices and education, as far as themselves, that they could go away and help themselves with, in not just at that moment, but in years to come, and understand why they were felt like they felt, and how they could get out of that, and how they could improve and actually have a thriving life, rather than maybe stuck where they are at that moment in time.
I guess, all of us have things to discover about ourselves and, things that we could learn. Are you of the view that almost everyone should have some sort of therapy at some point throughout their life?
Okay, so whether you call it therapy, and that's why I call myself a therapist, a counselor, or a coach, I
Yeah.
don't care what label you choose to put on it. But the stuff that I've learned and the stuff that I know, some of it I believe it should be taught in senior schools, because the practical skills that enable the individual, the human, to work in the 21st century, because we're not used to working and living the way that we do at the moment. We used to live in tribes of 100 and 150, and we had hierarchies in that, and we had community in that we don't almost is non-existent. I'll give you an example. There's a study that's done in the US, and I think they do it every couple of years, certainly every 2 years or 5 years, and it's aimed at university students. And what they look at is young men, and one of the questions they ask them is, if you had to get you was in an emergency and you had to get hold of somebody, who would you call at 3 o'clock in the morning? In other words, who's your best buddy, and so on and so forth. 10 years ago, that study would have thrown up between 2 and 5 people they would ring. That study was done 2 years ago, the last time it was done, and the answer, majority, was 0. And that's quite sad. And if you look at for example, the suicide rate, in looking at particularly young men under 25, it keeps going up year after year after year. And that's because we've become more and more isolated.
Well, there certainly does seem to be, I say a problem, whether it's a problem or an issue with young men, suicide, loneliness, the feeling that they don't necessarily fit in. It's like, and that has developed, hasn't it, massively in recent years. What do you think some of the key factors are behind that?
Well, if you look at how we develop, okay, so for example, clubs and societies, etc. So a generation ago, young people would be going to the Scouts or the Brownies or the Cubs, and then after that they would go on to youth clubs and so on and so on. So there was a sense of community, a sense of camaraderie. Now, what you're likely to find is the average young person, so when they start hitting their teenage years, are always on one of these things.
Yeah.
Or, particularly boys, they're in their rooms playing games online.
Yeah.
And it's good that they're online with other people, but the first thing is, do they know who they are really talking to on the other side of the world or wherever it happens to be? And secondly, how many hours have they spent in their room relatively isolated and relatively unable to have what I would call proper human conversations? And human conversations mean you're not online like we are now. You're actually face to face. You're seeing the person's reaction to you and what you're saying and what they're saying as well. And that's really important for humans. We're not used to 2D, we're used to 3D.
That's really key, that it's building up those relationships actually in real life. And I guess there's a whole group as such, if I'm putting it in that category, of teenagers who went through COVID as well. So actually, whether they initially started off or sitting in their room playing games or not, actually that was almost forced upon them, that if you want to talk to someone, you're in your room on a computer, because actually the other rooms were full of siblings and parents and so on and so on. So actually it was almost forced upon them. But that has now continued as to that's what people do. And actually, you mentioned about, going out when you're younger, Cubs and Scouts and things like that. And I guess even as you get into the late teen years, nightclubs, we'd go out with friends, but actually even nightclubs are starting to dwindle here in the UK. I'm seeing a massive number closing because people don't go out in the same way. And I know there's a cost associated with that, which is obviously having an impact, but equally, people are just socializing online.
Yes, that's exactly right. But also, we are getting more and more anxious about seeing people face to face. And of course, once you start getting anxious about things like that, you start losing the ability to be able to read people and understand body language and understand the way a person speaks to you and the tone that they use and the inference they use on different words. So being able to do that is so important to young people. Okay, and and you can also lose that as you get older. I mean, if you think about the hybrid way of working, i.e., we all work at home, or we hardly ever go into the office. My personal take on all of that is having a mixture is probably the best way. Maybe 3 days in the office and 2 days at home. And the reason I say that is because all the water cooler moments that you used to have. So a younger person having a conversation with an older person, and that older person giving that younger person tips and tricks about how to do something or how to act in a particular manner in a up and coming important meeting, and so on and so forth. All that stuff is lost because we're online and we haven't got the time to do that. And of course, if you're online and that's all you see, right, then the anxiety levels start picking up when you see on the calendar or the diary that John and Jeff are off having a conversation. Are they going to be talking about me? And you're not party to that, and so on and so forth. And we've got fantastic imaginations, humans, and we can catastrophize ourselves into a very dark place if we're not careful.
Yeah, I want to pick up on that actually, but just reversing a little bit, that those almost like micro mentoring parts that you said, like exactly like you said, those conversations, someone new to a workplace will have with an older colleague that you won't have online, because actually your only interaction with someone would be for a specific purpose. So we're talking about this project and is it on target, and then you're off and you're cracking on with work. Those little round the coffee machine, round the water cooler, you then ask each other about certain things, even get to know about their life and, get some, and I can see for a young person, they're really missing out on, I would call it almost micro mentoring, just hearing experiences from someone who's been in the workplace 20, 30 or more years, that actually is really beneficial to a young person. Because doing your job is one thing, but actually you learn about the job and you as a person, how to interact with people and all those soft skills. You learn from those from actually talking to people and seeing people. And it was really interesting you were saying about how you read people, because that's such a skill now, those soft skills. And you mentioned empathy right at the start, but that comes from really listening to someone and understanding almost what they're trying to say, even if they haven't said the exact words, and just picking up those little bits, which I guess is so much harder online.
It is. When our brains can't cope with it. I mean, I don't know whether there's people out there that may have noticed that if they're working online all day and they're having meetings online, you get very, very tired very, very quickly. It's because the way our eyes are set up. Okay, focal length, season, distances, etc., and the way we come across online with that 2D effect is really hard for our brain to understand and keep using. What happens is we get very, very tired very, very quickly. There's been studies that having meetings online and having meetings face to face, and our brain works much harder online than it does face to face.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Just that, and I've had it where I've been exhausted at the end of the day, and all I've done is sat in front of a computer. And it's like, but I'm worn out. And actually, then I find that in the evening, I struggle to have proper conversations. When I say, but yeah, obviously I can still talk, but I don't want a deep conversation. I just want to have a bit of small talk and veg out in front of the TV, because I guess my brain has just worked so hard to be able to have those conversations, and it's working extra hard to pick up on those micro little interactions so that I can have a good meeting with someone, that actually it's just exhausted.
Exactly.
You were saying about imagination as well, if I can pick up on that, because there is that thing, and I know certainly in, there's many of us who are more aware of, neurodivergence and differences, but we almost over worry about things. And I've known that I've done it in the past. If I've got a 3:00 meeting, actually for hours and hours before that, I almost can't do anything. I'm frozen because I've got a meeting at 3:00. And whereas my brain, nothing's changing that. My brain, I'd want it to just go, well, that meeting's at 3:00. So think about it at 2:55. But it doesn't. It conjures up all these worst case scenarios. And then in the end, it ends up being a 15-minute meeting and we all come away smiling. But our brains do it. Is that the fight and flight? Is it there to protect us and it just gets it wrong?
Absolutely. So what I try and tell my clients is, let's first of all look at what the mechanics of things, and going back to the computer analogy. Okay, so our brains are Windows 3.1 or before that. Okay, because we're in a 21st century environment and we're not used to it. Our brains are not used to having to deal with the potential threats that we perceive throughout our day. And our potential threat might be that meeting at 3:00 that you mentioned, okay, or that potential threat with that client that we've got to find out about because we've had an email about it. We don't know anything else, but we do know it's an important client. And are they going to be annoyed with us? Are they happy with us? What's going to the outcome? And then what happens is we start imagining what could be going on or what could be happening at that meeting. Okay, and our brain, as I said, our imaginations will run wild and it'll get bigger and huger and larger. Now, in order to quieten that and calm that mind down, what we need to do is learn how to calm our systems. And what I mean by that is, every time we have a thought and we're worrying about something, then a little amount of cortisol will be fired into the system, and adrenaline fired into the system. Okay. The problem with that and it not being allowed to get rid of that cortisol and adrenaline, it starts building up. Now, unless somebody can tell me differently, I've only come across two ways of getting rid of cortisol and adrenaline. The two ways are either movements or breath work. Now, the movement part is, if you go back to the fact that we are BC creatures, in other words, we've been around a long, long time, going back to our natural habitat, we were nomads, we're nomadic, okay, and we were in tribes, we were in herds, if you like. We're in tribes of about 100, 150 was about the maximum. And we used to walk for miles and miles every single day. In fact, there's a documentary, I think it's on BBC at the moment, and there's a chap, I can't remember his name, and he's going to various parts of the world and looking at tribes. One of the tribes he encounters is in Africa, and they think of nothing of 15 miles is like a little wandering in their eyes. So 15 miles in our world, I mean, that would be horrendous. 15 miles in a day, that's almost a marathon. And so, and we're not. So our systems aren't used to sitting on our butt all day, which is what we do at the moment. So we've become very sedentary. We've become less involved with going out into nature. And I thought the whole nature and forest bathing and all that sort of stuff was really woo woo, and and it's nonsense. Well, actually, there's empirical evidence. If you follow the science, it's actually a thing. Okay, we do feel more grounded, more calm, more less anxious. Okay, and if we walk around in nature, even if it's for a short period of time. I mean, we've had some fantastic weather in the UK in the last few days. Okay,
Yeah.
and hopefully for the rest of this week as well. And I urge people to go out and spend 15 or 20 minutes out in nature if they can, because what will happen is the movement will help reduce the cortisol and the adrenaline. Okay, and that feeling of well-being will come across because you're in direct sunlight as well, and you're getting vitamin D, and all those positive things will help you just de-stress a little bit.
There's been a period of time where, all of that is certainly becoming more popular with people. And one thing I've sort of noticed is, if I think back, not even that many years ago, we always felt the issue with sitting at a desk all day was purely physical. It was like, get up and go to the gym because, all you're doing is sitting and you're not getting any exercise. And I've now realized it's as much mental. It has as much of a negative effect mentally as it does physically, sitting in front of a screen, not talking to anyone. And do you think we're just catching up on that actually a lot of it we need to do more for our mind? And actually our mind is as powerful, if not more powerful, than the physical body that we've got.
Okay, so I completely concur with that in terms of it's clearly it's a problem physically if we're sitting down all day, but from a mental point of view, it's even more important that we get out and move. Okay, for all sorts of reasons. But our mental health. Okay, so our mental health can be compromised because we're isolating ourselves. Isolation is not what we're about. We're used to being in a set of people. That's why, again, when we stopped being nomads and we started homesteading, right, villages were made up of about 100 and 150 people. That's not a coincidence. Okay, that's
No.
because everybody looks after everybody else. You knew your neighbours. You knew who was around. You knew the various tradespeople that were in your village. You'd have a carpenter. You'd have a butcher. You'd have literally a candlestick maker. You'd have all these various tradespeople. Okay, and they were there, and you had interaction with them almost every day, and
Yeah.
that is so important. Acts of kindness, for example. So if you give an act of kindness to somebody, right, you get the happy drug.
Yeah.
So does the person getting the act of kindness. But what else happens is, if somebody's watching an act of kindness, they get the happy drug as well. There's no
Okay.
coincidence. The reason for that is so that we have cohesion in our society. Right. Equally, if you've got a boss that's anxious or stressed or depressed, that anxiety, okay, comes out in sweat hormones, okay, and it infects the rest of the team, and they become anxious as well. And again, this isn't woo woo.
No.
This is cold hard science that's been tried and tested. There's been various papers written about all of this kind of stuff. Okay. Equally, if the boss is in a good place and positive, and that those positive happy hormones also come out and are picked up upon. So we are still, in essence, humans are made up to communicate and be in a common place, in a common society. So the more interactions we can have in real life, the better it's going to help us going forward. The better in our mental health. And if you also look in the last 10 years at, and I mentioned societies with younger humans, older humans, and midlife humans, okay, if we go back just after the Second World War, was the biggest boom of societies being developed and made up. And what I mean by that is things like the Women's Institute and you know the worshipful fellows of buffaloes and all the rest of it. Okay,
Yeah.
all those kind of things that were basically civic societies within your community blew up. Okay, there were so many in across Europe because after people wanted to come back after the war and start building communities. And it's certainly in the last 10 years, those sorts of societies have dwindled more and more and more. Those of you that have got kids would notice that it's really difficult to get into maybe the guys and the brownies, and the reason being is because they haven't got so many volunteers because it's too much like hard work to do that. So slowly but surely, all these structures that we have in place are getting eroded and getting eroded and getting eroded, and what you end up with is a quite stressed out, anxious, awkward in some cases, a human that doesn't know really how to interact with other humans.
And I guess all of that then just overflows into more societal problems that we're going to have as people grow up. It was interesting what you said there about the guides and these groups. I've got a friend of mine who runs a guide group, and she's regularly said actually the problem isn't getting more kids; it is getting more volunteers to help run it. That's always been, or certainly now is the problem. And you're right, there are less groups, and while we love to feel like we're connected with people on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and we've probably never been more connected, yet at the same time been more disconnected, because we think we know someone and think we know their life, and therefore we don't necessarily actually reach out and ask them or feel like we need to speak to them because we know what they've been doing, but actually we've only seen it on a very micro level of we've seen a photo of something they did at the weekend. We don't know actually how they are, what's going on. And I guess that in person, face to face, you pick up on those interactions. What do you think needs to change in society? I mean, that's a massive question, and I'm not expecting the full, but where would we start to improve things?
Well, I'm a great believer in starting with yourself. Okay, and one of the reasons I changed, and pivoted to doing what I'm doing now is because I like being curious. So being curious for me is striking up a conversation with a stranger at a bus stop. Okay, or and even if isn't it lovely that we've got some nice weather today? Having a conversation, and it not necessarily being particularly meaningful, okay, and being kind to yourself and being kind to other people is, I think, very human and it's very good for us. Another thing that I practice myself, but I encourage my clients to do so. And again, it's been scientifically proven to help us. Is have a gratitude practice. So a gratitude practice is thinking. Usually, it doesn't matter when you do it, but if you can do it a few times a week, and to get used to doing it, start doing it every day. And that is, think of 10 things that bring you gratitude, you're grateful for. Okay, for maybe you found something that you was grateful for the previous day. Okay, or you're grateful that you're fit, or you're grateful that you've got a roof over your head. Okay, and I always ask people to think about who's your hero in history, and somebody will say Churchill or various other people. Okay, and I point out to them, well, that particular person, if they were around 100 years ago, They didn't have a hot shower like you did today. They didn't have
No.
central heating. They didn't. So all these things that we take for granted, they didn't have. So there's lots to be grateful for, and we kind of dismiss it. And the other thing to do is find something or a couple of things that brought you joy the previous day. And contemplating those types of things are very, very good at shifting your mindset and shifting your brain chemistry just ever so slightly. Okay, and being slightly more optimistic is a positive thing for you and for other people that interact with you.
It's interesting you're saying about being grateful, and I think there's so much that we should be grateful for and can be. I think lots of people think, oh, I can't think of 10 things, but actually you listed off a load of things that we take for granted, which actually we should always be grateful for. And you can put those on your list and that's fine. Because of those amazing things, the central heating, the hot shower, I even think of it of how comfy my sofa is and the trainers that I've got that have got an air bubble in. Everything is designed to make life amazing. And I've heard this before. Do you think we have a little bit of a comfort crisis? As in, life is very comfortable and we might moan about lots of stuff, but actually, maybe we're not grateful enough that actually we've got clean drinking water, easily accessible, and we've got a hot shower to wash with. And I just take that for granted, but not everyone has it. And equally, 100 years ago, not many people had it.
Exactly. So humans are designed to have stress. Okay. In other words, so for example, ultra running. Now, 50, 60, 80 years ago, nobody really heard about ultra running because it was, it wouldn't have been a thing. Okay. I mean, when the first railways came to were about in the UK, we thought that we would be shattered because of the motion of the railways and how we shuddered. It would break us. Of course, it doesn't, and it didn't. Equally, we've kind of almost lost the ability to struggle a little bit. Okay? And what I mean by that is ultra running. People that I've got a colleague of mine, and their happy space is 75 miles. I mean, I couldn't contemplate that. 75 miles, okay, non-stop, and that just proves that we are more than capable of doing extraordinary things, and we are more than capable of being able to do our physical reps of whatever you want to do. But we need to understand that if it's easy to phone up and get Uber Eats or Just Eat, etc., so you get a takeaway. Okay, you don't have to move from your screen 24/7. All you're doing is you're creating a huge health negative further down the line for yourself. Okay, on all sorts of levels, physically, mentally, emotionally, all of the above is going to suffer. We need to be able to be a little bit more stressed in terms of our bodies by doing things that take us out of our comfort zone. That's good for us. It helps us learn. It helps us build. Our fight or flight mechanism is trained. Is not designed to make us happy. It's designed to keep us safe. It's designed for survival. So we can be in survival mode, very anxious, very concerned, but we're not going to die at that moment. And the problem with that is it doesn't necessarily make us happy. So we're all going around being miserable because we're in this keeping in our own lane and not being curious to go over there, and so on and so forth. And it's very, very damning for us. Whereas if we were, in a society that all of a sudden all these trappings were taken away from us, we'd have to learn to find our own food again. We'd have to, we'd our circadian rhythm, our
Yeah.
24-hour clock would soon go back to us waking up at dawn and going to bed at sort of an hour or 2 hours after sunset, because that would be the natural rhythm. I'm not suggesting we do that. I'm just explaining that that's what, if our bodies were allowed to do their own thing, as it were. Okay, then we wouldn't be doing the things that we do. Sleep, for example, which is one of the things I specialise in. We've only been sleeping 7, 8, 9 hours a night since the 1700s. Before that, we were all peasants working the land, and we used to have a siesta, and we used
Yeah.
to wake up at about 3 o'clock in the morning for about an hour to do our prayers and do some mundane things, then go back to sleep for another couple of hours, and then wake up. So this whole sleep in one block is something that we've learnt and we've been taught as a baby to do. You think about, if anybody is parents or uncles and aunts, etc. If you look at how a newborn is brought back into the home, they're taught to sleep. They're taught to have a routine. They're taught that they're going to have their dinner, then they're going to have bath time, then they maybe have a story, then they're going to sleep. So there's a whole ritual in place.
That's really interesting. I mean, I was going to ask about, there's almost that correlation between the better things have been, the more we're in a period of time where we have access to anything, like you say, the Uber Eats, we've got hot water, almost like the more we've got actually correlates to actually a decrease in our happiness. So we'd think it would be the other way round, but we've actually created a situation where we've made it so comfortable and so good and everything's so easy accessible that actually our happiness has gone down. I mean, am I right in that?
Yes, I think you are, and I think it goes back to the fact that we are so much more isolated, and we are, we're. If you think about your average human in the UK, for example, there's very little interaction with other humans throughout the course of their day, and potentially throughout the course of their week. Because I'm not going to count online as being part of an interaction, because it's not
No.
real. Okay, and your brain and your body doesn't notice it or feel it. Okay, your brain and your body also doesn't notice or feel the connection with somebody if you're unless you're in their company. And that's hugely important. And I think that we're especially when I'm a school governor at our local senior school, and I go in and do talks on how to reduce anxiety by breathwork, and I also teach them how to boss interviews and stuff like that through looking at body language, etc. The point is, though, what I see is this isolation within their community, in terms of they find it very difficult and they find it very anxious to interact with other humans, because as soon as they can, the phone comes out and they're getting these little hits of dopamine. And are they being liked? Bullying, for example, in schools has gone off the Richter scale. Why? Because it used to be, if you had a bully at school, you lift that at the gates. But now, with our phones, we can be bullied 24/7, because we're going to be looking at our phones 24/7. That's what we do. Phones in the bedroom. I bet you, is your phone in your next to you where you sleep?
Within a meter of my head.
Okay,
I can reach it. Put it that way.
So clients that I have that are finding difficulties as far as sleep is concerned, I try and initially get them to at least move the phone as far away from them as possible within the room, and eventually negotiate that it's out of the room. Buy yourself an alarm clock for £5. Okay, that's fine. An old-fashioned alarm clock, because otherwise, the only two things you need to use to happen in your bedroom is sex or sleep, nothing else. we shouldn't be on electrical devices. We shouldn't be looking at the television, not because the sleep. Our brains don't understand that this is not an activation area. Okay, for Netflix or for this app or that app. Okay, and we get confused. Whereas what we need to do is learn, like we learned as babies, how to sleep through the night. And we need to take all this stuff away from us.
Sleep is such a big one, isn't it? But we often hear. I mean, it was really interesting. You were saying about how we used to sleep and how we do now. And I've also heard that if we were all placed on a remote island, actually within a couple of weeks we would be sleeping based on when the sun was up and it was down.
Our bodies. It's less than that. There was a study done. So I think it's about 10 or 15 years ago now, maybe even a bit longer. But at Google. The real there's a real high end set of people, and they were all going down the burnout route.
Yeah.
And Google were quite worried about this, so they got a psychologist in, and these 10 or 15 people, he grabbed hold of them and got them out of the office. They went on a camp, so they camped in the middle of Californian woods and stuff. Okay, so they took all the phones were taken away, their watches were taken away. They had no access for the outside world at all. It's just them, the camp. They had plenty of food to eat, and that was it. Okay, within 3 days, they were all finding sleep much happier, and within 7 days, they were in a complete rhythm as far as getting up and getting up when dawn came and going to bed about an hour or 2 hours after lights out, as it were. Okay, and all their hormone levels were tested afterwards in terms of where their anxiety levels were, etc., and all of them were in a much better place.
I think that's one of the things that when any of us are sort of, going through a tough period in our life, we often maybe look for what are the big fixes? What do I need to do? What's the next thing? But actually, from what you're saying, some of the basics of moving, breathing and sleeping are actually huge, almost like curers of anxiety, our stress levels. Actually, if we could just do those simple things, we would deal with life much better.
Absolutely, because you'll remember, going back to what I said, you're dealing with a machine, okay, ourselves, the human, okay, we're dealing with a machine which is really old, okay, so it's not sophisticated as such in terms of the 21st century. So if you want to be calmer, then you look at ways of breathing that reduces your sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight. It gets you into fight or flight, which I have to say a majority of us are in normally. Okay, and then you need to bring it down to a parasympathetic nervous system level, which is much calmer and almost trance-like, and that allows you then to calm the system down. Okay, and then the cortisol is not at ridiculous levels. What used to happen when we were in tribes running around the Serengeti, we used to go out and be stressful because we're going to try and get a hunt going or gathering stuff, and things would happen and people would get hurt for various things, etc. Then come back into camp, round a campfire. We'd mull over our day with the rest of the people around the campfire, okay, and that would be where we unstress ourselves and de-stress about the day, because you'd be talking about, there's that creek down there. I found there was a snake. Oh yeah, you don't want to go near that part of there. You need to go further on, and so on and so forth. So we'd be talking about our worries, etc. Again, that's something that we almost have to think about the last time we had that conversation with somebody.
Yeah, it's so true, and I'm sure lots of people listening will be thinking, I haven't really spoken to someone on that level for a long time. If you were to give to them some, 2 or 3 really basic tips as to how we can all just start on this journey of reducing stress, sleeping better? What things can we easily implement?
Okay, so if you're sleeping, sleep. If you're finding a a tough period in your life to get sleep, okay, so, first of all, don't try and bank sleep hours at the weekend. Okay, I'm going to lie in because I've had a really bad week of sleep. It doesn't work like that. Sorry. Okay, your brain isn't that clever. It doesn't. It's not like banking money and getting a nice healthy balance. It doesn't work like that. So what you do is whatever time you're going to have to wake up in the morning, then you count back from there a sensible time to sleep. Okay, there's all manner of ways of getting you to sleep, but first of all, you need to have a big a beginning time to sleep and an end time, and make that happen 7 days a week. So it does, because your brain doesn't know it's the weekend. I know you think it does, but it doesn't. Okay? From that point, from a practical point of view, it doesn't. So that's the first thing. Second thing is anxiety. Anxiety is built up from your imagination. If you think about it, okay, anxiety is based on thought. Thought is based on is based on emotion. If you
Yeah.
think about the last time you was anxious about something, it would have been based on a thought that would have been based on an emotion. Both of those things aren't you. If you think about that, then they're not you. So you are you, okay, and the emotion that's happened because of a something is your reaction to it. And what I would suggest is that we try and distance ourselves from the emotion and distance ourselves from the thoughts, okay, and sit in that area of, okay, almost contemplation, okay, and that's where the breathing comes in. There's all manner of breathing options. I recommend about half a dozen different types, okay, because not one size doesn't fit all, and that's the other thing. We're all different. Okay, so
Yeah.
you need to actually tweak it a little bit, etc., which is again what I do with my clients. So I've got a plethora of tools, and I pick and choose those for that particular person and for that particular issue.
Yeah.
But going back to the again the anxiety thing, a lot of it is to do with I've got all this stuff going on, and I've got all I'm worrying about X, Y, Z. Well, in an hour before you go, you're deciding to hit the pillow. Write it all down. Write everything down. Doesn't matter, and you're the only person that's going to see this stuff written down. Okay, and it's really important to write it down with a pen or a pencil on paper,
Yeah.
not make a list on your laptop or make a list on your phone. Why? Because there's a connection between your hands and writing, okay, in your brain, okay, and that will help your subconscious remember that when you've hit your pillow and you recognize, oh, I've written that down. It's in the journal. It's in the book. It's up in the notepad. Okay, so I don't have to worry about that. And you might wake up at silly o'clock in the morning because you're worrying about something. No, I've written that down. Or no, I haven't written that thing down. I'll write it down. Okay, and you're not going to get over that the first night or the second night. Habits, forming positive habits. How long does a habit take? Now, if we ask the panel of people how long does a habit take to form, they will say the average will be about 28 days, 30 days, something like that. Okay. The reality is, how long does a habit take? It depends.
Okay.
And the average is between 20 and 230 days.
Okay. Yeah.
So it depends on the thing. If
Yeah.
you're adverse to exercise and your habit you want to form is, I'm going to do a 5K run every day, no matter what, and you hate running, guess what? It's going to take more than 28 days to make that a
Yeah.
habit. Okay. However, if your habit is, I'm going to say hello to three people on a daily basis on my way to wherever. Okay, but I'm going to make that a habit, and you start getting positive feedback from that within a couple of days. That habit's going to take very very short time to fall.
Yeah.
So it depends.
There's some great tips in there. Simon, can I just first of all just thank you for joining me today, because you've really given me some things to think about, and I've tried a little bit of journaling and gratitude, and actually that's a habit I should build up, because I think that'd be a really powerful one that I could add. But just your insights on how we slept and how we should sleep, and just dealing with the stresses. And I guess big takeaway for me as well is actually try and carry on building up those in real life connections rather than just meeting people online. So thank you for joining me today, and carry on doing the great work you're doing. It was brilliant to hear that actually you're going into schools and or a school and talking in there, because I think that's it's something I'm passionate about, that I think a lot of young people are going to have a really tough time because of this environment and society that we've partly been responsible for building at our age. So it's great that you're able to give something back and help support them. So thank you for joining me, and enjoy the rest of your day.
You're most welcome.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Balanced Ambition podcast. I genuinely hope the stories inspire you as much as they inspire me. If you found value in today's conversation, please share it with a friend. And remember, by subscribing, you won't miss an episode, and it would truly mean the world to me. Stay balanced, and I'll see you next time.